Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realms continuing coverage of the Roswell UFO Festival right here at the International UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. We have the great pleasure of being joined by not only Travis Walton himself, famed abductee, but also Jen Stein, who is the creator of the Travis Walton, let me see that, the Travis Walton documentary. This came out a few years ago, and it's available on Amazon, all kinds of platforms, but really goes into a lot more of the case. Most people are familiar, of course, with the movie Fire in the Sky, but that is one of the things that we demystify on the show regularly is things like that, things like the Tom Reed case, where what people know about the Reed family case is not really a lot of what the Reed family case is about, and very much is the same thing with your case, Travis, where the movie Fire in the Sky touched on a lot of things, but also,
things,
precisely. So if you don't mind, for our listeners and viewers out there who may not be familiar with your case, go into it for just a couple of minutes for us.
All right, well, the simple version is I was working with a logging crew in the forest in 1975. This is almost 50 years ago. And we'd finished a hard day's work. We're headed home. We encountered a UFO on the way. And just thinking it would take off before I got close, I just jumped out and ran towards it, and much to the alarm of my coworkers. And got close enough to where I was hit by a blast of energy from this craft. They sensibly fled in terror. I mean, they didn't, they thought they were next. And they said that they were yelling, it killed him, he's dead. So I find no fault in them. People have commented and said, oh, well, we're a bunch of heroes. Well, they came back.
Yeah.
That's heroic.
Absolutely.
So after they got down the road, they came back, and by then the craft had taken me away.
Wow.
I woke up on board the craft in a great deal of pain, and encountered these alien beings. Now, people call the grays typical, like as if there's one species, I don't know, there might be a number of species of similar descriptions, but I think most aliens are going to be humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, like that. But I was terrified. To me, I was surrounded by these monsters and feeling very injured. And I lashed out at them. Eventually, I was able to, I thought, scare them away, and I was, quote unquote, rescued by another being, a human-looking being.
Wow.
Took me out of that craft. Now, this man could have been somebody they got the assistance of from Earth, or it could have been something they created, or maybe there are similar species of beings out there that they got. But anyway, it was the only thing I was going to trust. So I trusted him, and I went with him, and he took me out of there to a place where I was rendered unconscious, and woke up 5 days later on the road outside the town nearest where this happened, in time to see the craft that dropped me off, I assume, take off into the sky. Ran down into the town, called my family, and discovered when they picked me up that how much time had gone by. I thought it was still the same night.
Yeah.
But my co-workers had been accused of murdering me.
Yeah.
And making up this incredible story to explain my disappearance. And so, they actually took police lie detector tests before I was ever returned.
Wow. Yeah,
and passed them. And some of the crew have taken more than one, but everybody has passed the lie detector test. And I've passed at least 3 different examiners. One examiner was the state police polygraph examiner.
Yeah.
Another was one that did all of the police work for the Albuquerque Police Department and did work for the Central Intelligence Agency. So the highest qualification, and that's what I kept doing, is going back to get the highest qualifications I could. One of the guys on the crew, every time he got a new wife, he got a new polygraph test.
Well, and this is a case that I refer to regularly, especially when it comes to the way that abduction and even paranormal experiences to begin with affect people for life and even relationships.
Definitely.
Because once again, your friend Mike was accused of murder. He lost logging contracts, like all kinds of things were a wave of repercussion of this that is life lasting beyond just the experience that you had.
A lot of persecution and things, John talks about walking down the street and having people yell out the window, "Murderer!"
Yeah.
Terrible. Like I told you about the one guy who got a new lie detector test for every new girlfriend, but a lot of pressure. And his uncle, I think it was, started heckling him about having cried, And he, after, coming with me, talking, support, appearing with me, he suddenly wanted me to change the book to eliminate the report that he had cried. I said, Steve, I cried, Mike cried, there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
But, he wouldn't let up. He's still angry that that's in the book. I said, look, I wasn't there. I'm just going by what the rest of the crew told me.
Yeah.
And the sheriff said that some of the men were crying.
Well, and because not just for you, but for them, once again, a traumatic experience. They saw this happen to their friend, their coworker.
Yeah.
When you're out there, especially in logging, things like that, where you have major safety things going on. Like there is a brotherhood of trust that happens.
Yeah.
Where you get very close to the people that you work with.
Yeah, because it's outdoor work, rugged environment. Wild animals, bears, and
somebody gets hurt, they're the people you're relying on.
Yeah. And we've had been summoned for help on emergencies for people. The forest fire. Our crew is equipped to fight forest fire. We have the equipment, the experience, and we would go and help them. At that time, if there was tall dead trees, they wanted us to drop those to keep the fire from topping out. But now with environmentalists, I'm not sure whether they allow that anymore because woodpeckers or the animals make holes in the dead trees, and I'm not sure whether we're doing that anymore. But
nesting areas for owls and things like that. Yeah. Well, with that in mind, that brings up a point of, did you return to that kind of work after your experience? At first, I didn't even want to leave the house, but eventually I made myself go back to work in the woods.
Oh, wow.
To overcome the fear.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say that I only went with someone else and armed, but I got over it and was able to function in the woods a lot like I had before.
Well, that's good, and a huge point of healing for you, I'm sure, especially because that's anybody that does that kind of work, you do it because you love being outdoors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With that in mind, how do you feel about your experience now, Travis? I know it still fully impacts you.
It's a 180-degree departure, you know, because at the time, this was an attack by monsters who nearly killed me.
Absolutely.
And it was gradually dawned on me that if they meant me harm, I never would have been returned. They could have dumped my body on some asteroid, let the crew hang for murder and disguise their appearance locally.
Sure.
But because I needed the help, they were the only ones that could do that to cure the problem that was caused by this blast of energy.
Yeah. And many people, especially that have been taken aboard craft, abducted, things like that, have had lasting physical effects, have even had changes, gifts that have come to them, things like that. Have you ever experienced anything like that, Travis?
I was very apprehensive about after effects, and the medical tests, checkups that I had. At first there was one thing, an aching head, but that went away pretty good. And I have headaches, I'm just not the person that has headaches, but it was actually turned out to be quite the opposite,
Okay.
that rather than coming up with some strange malady, I didn't get sick for many years afterwards.
Wow.
I never called in sick one time for work, even though I was working myself 12 hours a day just to forget the memory, I mean, not just 12 hours a day, every holiday and days off. I was volunteering for overtime, but my body was somehow able to handle all that quite well.
Incredible. Now, let's kind of pivot real quick to the documentary and how the documentary came to be, because once again, the sensationalized story of Hollywood, things like that, did not really express a lot of even what you've expressed today, Travis. So, Jen, how did you first come to meet Travis? How did the documentary first start coming to be?
Well, it actually happened right here in Roswell.
Okay.
I was working for the city with Peter Robbins in 2010, and I knew Travis's story and bought his book at that point, got to meet him and his son Clifton. And we had dinner at Pepper's just up the street and had a bottle of wine and a group of us sitting around talking, and we said, to Travis, your story is just as significant as the Roswell story.
Yeah.
And maybe your town might like to do a conference. So I kind of got into this documentary from the back door. We started planning a conference for the 40th anniversary, and 2010 was 5 years before the 2015, which would have been the 40th anniversary of his event. And we just started talking about the idea of doing a conference up there, which I didn't really think was probably going to fully happen, but it did. And Travis had the idea of wanting to take conference attendees up into the forest at night. And as a conference coordinator, I was thinking this wasn't maybe a very smart idea. And I was getting a little worried that, if I've got to buy insurance for this event and we're taking people into the forest at night that may need to use a bathroom, or they're walking with a cane or a walker, and it's a 45-minute hike into the forest. I was thinking, let's just sit everybody down and interview them, and then a nice, comfortable, a secure, comfortable conference room. Let's show them the video of the forest. Let's show them the video of these guys talking about the event. So I interviewed all the living logging members. I flew out and did a couple of weeks of interviews. And then gradually I realized that Marlon Gillespie was still alive and still lived in Holbrook.
Sheriff.
Okay.
The sheriff.
Sorry, folks, we actively just had a little bit of a battery issue where randomly our battery died around Travis. So, fun stuff.
So I took the challenge on of doing this film about the Travis Walton story. First of all, I had so much respect for what Travis had been through.
Sure.
And after meeting him, I realized that no one had ever done a documentary. There was a Hollywood film, but no one had really bothered to tell the real story. And I, through the back door, planning this conference, got to interview all of the logging men, and then my respect just grew for all of them.
Yeah.
And I realized I could interview Sheriff Marlon Gillespie, who was the chief investigator on this case, and I could interview Chuck Ellison, who was the chief deputy, the first one on the scene that interviewed the boys when they were still looking for Travis. And also Cy Gilson was still alive, and he lived in Tucson. So I was able to fly out, drive down to Tucson, and interview Cy in his home.
About the polygraph.
About the
tests that
polygraph
he gave.
exams, because he was the chief polygraph examiner in 1975. So I felt that these were important interviews to do.
Yeah.
And as a documentarian, it was a good challenge for me. So I just decided to take on the challenge. Not really sure I could make a decent film, but it ended up, being an award-winning film, and it made it into some mainstream film festivals. And I think it helped people to understand Travis better, the other loggers, and the details of what really happened.
Well, the numerous facets of the gem that is this case, literally, because it's one of those, even in my observation log, there's a section for, were there other witnesses? Were there other people there? Because we talk about it regularly on the show. Even my brother and I grew up in the same house, but if you ask us our experience of Christmas in 1985, they differ, even though we were at the same place in the same location at the same time. So to be able to garner all of the interviews of these people, to be able to
It turns
garner.
out there actually were witnesses other than the 7 loggers.
Oh wow, really?
Yes, there was a fisherman at the local lake that saw the craft depart.
Incredible.
And a couple of deer hunters who were actually, I think, on the contract in the woods near what happened, a deer hunter and his wife.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially working with MUFON, that's one of the big things that they are about, is being able to cross-locate different witnesses to confirm a sighting, to be like, this was triangulated, more than one person saw it from different locations in the same spot, things like that. So
Yes, of course, MUFON didn't exist at
No,
the time. It was
absolutely not.
APRO who was
Yeah.
on the case. Carl Lorenzo was there.
The Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO.
And also
Yeah.
Stanton Friedman showed up shortly after this event, and so did...
I think MUFON was kind of a fledgling organization at the time, just a fraction of what APRO was.
That's
but,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
they existed, but it was called the Midwest UFO
Pretty soon
Okay.
they
research.
took over.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and with that in mind, with additional investigation, things like that, especially interviewing the sheriff, there's a big movement right now, especially after Arrow, things like that, with law enforcement, other first responders being able to come forward. The work of UAPPD, we highly laud on this show, because if you can't let first responders talk about it, you've got a real problem. These are people that you trust with your daily
Well, that
safety.
was a problem that she overcame. She
Yeah.
was the first one to get the sheriff on record and other deputies to admit that they saw the legitimacy of the claim.
Wow.
Because up until that point, they were very shy about admitting to that on film.
Yeah.
I actually asked Marlon Gillespie if he'd had his own encounters, and he shares that on film.
Wow.
So anyone can go to TravisWaltonTheMovie.com, and there's a whole section called debunking, because this case has been attacked and attacked and
Absolutely.
attacked for 50 years. So I addressed some of the issues that people have come
Yeah.
after the Walton case with accusations. So I have little film clips up there that go over the details of this case for people who would like to look at it. And the full interview with Marlon is posted there for free. So people can just watch
Some of
it.
the alternate theories were really not just bordering on the absurd, they were ridiculous because
Such as?
one skeptic was claiming what the crew really saw was the planet Jupiter.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which would be a tiny point of
Which
light
took you away.
in the sky.
Yeah.
And somehow they became delusional, mystic, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. Oh, another theory was that it was really a fire watch tower that the Forest Service maintained, which was, 15 or 20 minutes from where we were.
That one I have heard.
Yes.
And that would have taken a long time. But, we had just barely loaded up our equipment, chainsaws in the truck, and we're headed home. There's no way we could have mistakenly gotten as far as where that tower was.
Yeah.
And besides, it was a building on stilts bigger than this room. There's no mistaking that in the slightest for an extraterrestrial
And they were
craft.
in a valley, the Turkey
Yep.
Springs Valley, where they were working. So the Forest Service does not put fire towers
Yeah.
in valleys. They put them at the highest,
That's
toppest
right.
peak so that they can see peak to peak to
Which
peak.
also was a
signal to
place
each other.
the searchers would checked everything from miles around during the posse combing the area, including going
Yeah.
to where the fire tower was. And
I also put drone footage up on
Oh,
the
wow.
website to show that we flew drones up and then did 360 degrees right around that event. And there
Interesting.
was no fire tower within
Yeah.
view. I mean, it was 3.9 miles away, the closest one, and you had to get up higher than this craft could have been to
Yeah.
actually
well,
see
the
the fire
skeptics
tower.
can be pretty desperate in their attempts to explain it away.
Absolutely.
When I was returned, I put in a call to my mother, which was a collect call on a payphone. The skeptic says, "Oh, he was never at that phone. He was hiding out with his mother in a cabin somewhere."
Yeah.
It so happens that the operator listened in on the call. It was such an emergency in the middle of the night that she paid attention to what was being screamed into the phone. And the sheriff actually sent deputies over to that phone booth.
Really?
But in the middle of the night, they didn't get there in time, but they checked it for fingerprints. And so the sheriff knew that the call came from there.
That it actively
But
happened.
that doesn't stop the skeptics from coming up with wild theories. And
Yeah.
there were a bunch of other ones, too, just as absurd.
Well, and that brings up, especially in the light of experiencers and trauma, things like that, just the idea of that, once again, how long lasting these things are. People once again have harassed and harangued you since the time of this happening. Same thing with Tom Reed. I mean, and one of the things that we've covered, like Peter Robbins is a very good friend. When the Napolitano documentary came out on Netflix, Earl Grey and I actually covered the lawsuit on my show. We asked Peter's permission, like, can we cover the lawsuit? I think this needs some attention. Because there have been quite a few divisive documentaries like that have come out in the last few years, calling question on major cases. Even Stephen Greer's announcement that the Betty and Barney Hill case was my labs. It's like, wait a minute, we didn't even have alien abduction at the time. How are you going to implant a memory of something that nobody has a trope of in their mind? That's strange to me, but it's a very divisive statement that really affects the light in which experiencers are looked at and in which their experience is looked at. And I think that's a very bad thing.
Well, it's a kind of a psychological phenomenon when people
Sure.
don't want to believe something, especially something that's scary.
Yeah.
Just give me anything to hang my hat on. Just some lame excuse like, oh, it's the planet Jupiter.
Yeah.
We checked the astronomical charts and Jupiter was in the night sky visible. And doesn't fit the description of what happened in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But anything they can hang their hat on, they'll use that as an excuse to disbelieve it.
Well, and, as we interviewed Donald yesterday, one of the things that I bring up regularly, I proudly wear my skeptic, like Superman's S, when I have to pull it out.
Yes.
But my job is to be looking for the evidence that will change my mind.
Right.
That's the job of a skeptic, not to belittle people
And
or
that's,
to.
the word for that is objective.
That's right. That's right.
A mixture of willing to accept verifiable,
Absolutely.
but skeptical and looking for something you
and-
can
and
verify.
Looking for the evidence.
Yeah. And much like any DA or anything like that, believing the experiencer until proven otherwise.
Right. And that's what makes Travis's case so significant. Anyone who has 7 witnesses to a murder that all say, yes, we saw this man murder this person, that would be a slam dunk deal in a court of
Without
law.
polygraph.
Without question.
Without polygraph. So
Yeah.
you see 7 witnesses that all
That's right.
see a UFO. One of them gets knocked unconscious, right? 6 of them see him fly through the air. Those loggers drive to the top of the Mogollon Rim, turn the truck around, and they all see the craft fly away from the top of the mountain. So they all knew the craft was gone when they went back.
Yeah.
And then Travis is missing. And then you have upwards of a couple hundred people looking for him for 5 days. I mean, the evidence is so significant.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if it mattered, if I cared that much, I would even go back and check the astronomical record. Was Jupiter really visible anyway? Or was this something they were grabbing out of thin air?
Sure.
One skeptic was making the claim that I had offered to deny the whole thing, except that he couldn't meet my price. Now, this was a barefaced lie.
Yeah.
I taped the conversation. No such offer was ever requested, and yet he made that offer. But strangely, if there was any truth to what he was saying, don't you think he would persist? I haven't heard a word from that guy.
Yeah. And you'd probably be a little better off in life, given the money payout.
Well, the number one skeptic, it turns out, was under investigation by the FBI.
Oh, wow.
He was editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology. Gives him great authority to speak about UFO sightings, right? Well, the FBI had quite a thick file on him.
Interesting.
Yeah, and one comment in the file says apparently this guy was not in full possession of his faculties.
Oh, wow.
They thought he was a wacko.
He's
the
speaking-
wacko.
He's speaking of Philip Klass, and it's
Oh.
well known that Philip Klass offered a bribe to Steve Pierce
Yep.
of
Yeah.
$10,000
Yeah.
Yeah,
in
took him out to dinner and tried to get him.
1979, 1980, something
Wow.
like that.
But the
Wow.
fact that the dinner date and offer never came to fruition is quite significant, you know?
Yeah.
And what's really strange, I think nobody really catches their attention that much, is here this guy launched this massive campaign against this incident, making it part of several books he published. He never attempted to speak to me, not a single word.
Wow.
He badgered the crew. He took Steve to dinner. It took hours on the phone with Mike Rogers, and letters exchanged back and forth, and not a word. Even when Mike and I were on Larry King, this guy, this skeptic, comes in from a remote camera. They didn't want him in the studio with us.
Yeah.
And he just ignored me completely. Didn't say a word to me. Started swearing some serious profanity on the Larry King show at Mike Rogers, and never said a word to me. So in his entire career, he never said a word to me. Now, isn't that strange? I
Yeah.
find it quite strange.
Yeah.
The main claimant, as he would call me, and he's not interested in speaking to me. I mean, you know, the media called me on the phone.
Sure.
Not a word from him. To devote parts of several books and hours of research to writing against the case, and he doesn't think. I mean, what if he thought I might slip up and say something or whatever?
Yeah.
You know, not a word from him. Why?
Yeah.
I find that odd.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't have an explanation. It doesn't prove anything one way or the
Well,
other.
I mean, it really shows the extent to which somebody will go and take these things, you know, and that's also something that we talk about regularly on the show, and not just in terms of investigation, things like that, but also in terms of just looking at things. You have to be willing to have the objectivity to look at stuff and not be looking for your confirmation of belief and marrying that with cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
You know, because this guy is obviously going through every effort possible and reaching for straws to try and disprove
Yes.
by any means necessary.
Yes, Philip Klass followed the Travis Walton case for 35 years, trying to debunk it in any way, shape, or form he could, in continuing articles and television interviews and things that he did.
To me, the fact that he never attempted to speak to me at all, not a letter, not a call, not anything,
Yeah.
to me suggests that maybe in this particular case, even he did not believe what he was promoting.
Yeah.
That, after his dinner date with Steve, he probably came away thinking,
Well, and
this probably happened.
yeah. Well, and it's especially one of those, much like any of the debunked experiencers, any of the people who've claimed to have experience, like there comes a point where, and even him, just to devil's advocate, as a debunker, he put something out there, people latched onto it, it went further, and at some point you have to make the make or break decision to stay with it. No different than, a cult leader who's like, hey, in 2025, August, like, it's all ending, man, and then September 1st comes, But what then? The message has to change and be altered now.
Yeah. True or false? You have to look at the fact that these skeptics very often make specific statements that are later proven to be outright lies.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
They've got an axe to grind and are willing to fudge the truth in order to make that point.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there isn't some sort of campaign to fund these debunkers. I have long suspected this.
And
so Philip Klass was, writer for Aviation Week and Science.
And space technology.
Thank you, space technology.
So he had access to all kinds of military aerospace type.
Yeah, he could go take pictures of the SR-71 if he wanted to, all kinds of things.
That's right. He was also single, and he went to many UFO conferences and pinpointed different groups or different presenters to literally attack, which he spent most of his life doing.
Well,
the other thing that's very interesting is I had the opportunity with Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Martin, who came to my home in Philadelphia, and we spent a week going down to the American Philosophical Society, which is an archive in Center City, Philadelphia. Now, the types of people who are archived there are like Thomas Jefferson, and some of our presidents, Adams, and like some of the founders, George Washington, and some great scientific writers, have their archives there. But to have your life's work archived in a professional archive means that you were part of establishing the meme and the foundation upon which our country stands on.
Yes.
And it costs thousands of dollars, $10,000 to $100,000 to have your own personal archive, organized and shelved and then computerized. Who would have paid to have this guy's material archived? Someone who wants to make sure that there is a record of debunking these UFO cases.
Yeah.
Now, not only that, he went after J. Allen Hynek for a long time.
Yeah.
And one of the...
who was working for the Air Force with his investigation.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you look at the J. Allen Hynek's life, and when he concluded his work with Project Blue Book, he went out and formed CUFOS, right? So to continue to study the UFO phenomenon, Center for UFO Studies, of which Don Schmidt actually ran for a long time. Interestingly, there was in the archives a lot of correspondence between Philip Klass and a young doctoral student at the University of Wisconsin. Was it Wisconsin? No, Northwestern University, where J. Allen Hynek was. His name was Robert Schaefer. So some of the most recent debunkers...
I hadn't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, Robert Schaefer.
That was another big
So there was lots of correspondence between Robert Schaefer and Philip Klass.
Discredited in other ways.
Now, this recent debunker who showed up in the forest in 2021 and tried to interview all of the loggers and tried to get them to in a fight with one another, especially Mike Rogers and Travis, he was pulling stuff up that Philip Klass had dealt with like 35, 40 years ago. And I'm watching these podcasts, UFO Classified, with Erica Lukes, and I'm thinking, what is going on? It sounds like Philip Klass has come back to life, like who's digging up these files and why? And this stuff was already disproven 30 years ago.
Well, he acted like he had built this big case.
Yeah.
But when I revealed that he lied about talking to me and that I had a tape, he went silent. I haven't heard anything.
And
But what's
I
very
remember
interesting-
seeing a lot of this, like, almost in real time on social media a few years ago.
Well, what happened is eventually on these podcasts, who shows up in one of the podcasts, multiple, Zoom screens, who finally shows up as being part of this? It was Robert Schaefer. So it became clear to me that Robert Schaefer was feeding this information to this young new podcaster.
There were some major discrediting things about him. I'd forgotten all about him.
He's tried to discredit you many times himself.
No, I'm talking about him discredited. He was discredited.
Once again, these campaigns that seem to be cropping up again when you're talking about these documentaries that have popped, because there's been 2 in the last year. There's been Tom Reed's thing over the last couple years along with this. You're talking about people like Lou Elizondo, who, thank God, we're having larger conversations because of things like ATIP. Yes. However, when you're talking in the last, not even the last year, the last 6-7 months, there have been 2 instances where he has a picture from a vetted source that he's putting out. One is a chandelier in a hotel, the other is a watering system. And it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be one of the authorities here. You got this from a secure, vetted source? It seems, once again, very divisive in the community that these things are happening. It's very wedge-like, and it's interesting to see people once again, and I love Lou. Lou, I love you. I'd love to have you on the show and talk to you, because I think what you've done is very important, but it's also very concerning when you see people who are security professionals, this is how they spent their career, and 2 and 6 months from vetted sources are absolute fakes. So it's kind of disturbing because it hacks away.
And claims on one side or the other have to withstand the fundamental test of time. Yeah. But they're willing to throw things out that get discredited. But the things that they're saying against people don't stand up to time.
No, exactly, and that's just it. Your cases like the Betty and Barney Hill case, those have stood the test of time.
Well, the discovery of the FBI file on Philip Klass was totally out of the blue. I got that file from a researcher who studied UFOs and who lived in Australia.
Oh, interesting.
So it wasn't me who went looking for it. They discovered it on their own, and it was a huge amount of material, page after page. I've got a sheaf of the file on Philip Klass, and large areas of it are blacked out. I would just love to know what's behind that.
And I would love to know who's paying these people, because to put some of these productions together as a filmmaker, I know, it takes some money and time and effort, especially if you show up with a large rig in the middle of the forest and you're camping.
You have the fortunate advantage of working with people like Ron James, who are like me, who own the camera production equipment. They own everything to do that. So it's not like they have to go to an outside production company to produce a documentary. Right. When you're going to an outside production company to sell something to Netflix or something like that, you're talking about a lot, commas and zeros. Yes. It's a big budget situation. So who is funding these things? And even the Napolitano documentary, like the ex-wife was part of the production team.
Yes.
So things like that. And people don't, when they're hearing that side of the story, they don't necessarily know that backstory in that kind of situation to know that, hey, what you might be seeing is slightly skewed because of the person who's producing it and what their angle is. So the fact that you guys have produced this documentary about Travis to expose all of the real things, to talk to the sheriff who, once again, had his own experiences, things like that changed him. And I'm sure the case itself changed the way he looked at future cases that he encountered,
And there's open source verification of much of this stuff. Like, I imagine anybody can apply for a copy of the FBI file on this, these skeptics, research has been done and they've been thoroughly discredited. But that's the thing about so-called debunking, skeptical attacks. Just throw something out there. Throw the mud ball on the wall and see what sticks. But
well, that's what proper research is. You're supposed to, much like you said, when the person never contacted you. Most of the time, it doesn't take a a shovel of dirt, you could trowel for a couple seconds and probably find some data if you looked hard enough.
Exactly.
You know?
I call it throwing paint.
That's it.
Someone who's a disinformant, all they have to do is throw out like a blanket
That's it.
of confusion,
Yep.
right?
It
Confuse
doesn't have
the
to be
facts.
real. It
Right.
doesn't have to be
Well,
real. All you have to do is make people
the
doubt.
people that buy it aren't co-conspirators. They're just vulnerable.
That's right.
By virtue of the fact that they wish it wasn't true.
Yeah.
They'll grab anything to
Yes.
justify that belief.
Exactly.
And when you confuse your public, what you really do is you undermine their ability to rationally think for themselves.
Yeah.
And when they stop thinking for themselves, that's when they start believing
Critical
the debunkers.
thinking stops.
Yeah.
Critical thinking stops. And your heart is as big as your head, Travis, for the fact that you see this from a point of love toward them. The fact of like, poor them that they're so afraid that they need to cling on to these thready stories of what never happened, so that they have some peace in their life. You know, that is hugely evolved of you.
They're just trying to quell their own fear. They're not. It's not born of hate or resentment. You know.
Absolutely. People fear what they don't understand, as the X-Men say.
Right.
And as we head out, number one, Travis, thank you so much for your time and your candidness. I greatly appreciate
Well, thank
it.
you for the opportunity to make some points. So.
Absolutely, forever and always. You're always welcome on this show to come on and do exactly that. Once again, there are a lot of shows that talk stories, things like that. We talk research. We like to talk to people exactly about this and demystify these topics for people. Let people know that Fire in the Sky is hands down one of my top 10 favorite movies, no doubt. I love it.
Well,
but I also know that is not a biographical of your event.
This is the kind of commentary that your audience is hungry for.
Yeah, precisely. So, but as we go out, let's make sure to promote this, but let's also, before we do that, words of advice, Travis, from both of you, actually, because you actually work with MUFON, everything else. We'll start with you, Travis. What advice would you give for somebody who has had an experience and is reticent to come forward with it?
I think it's within their own personal judgment whether to try to gain acceptance or not. In my case, I was fortunate to have multiple witnesses and other kinds of verifiable scientific indications, but it's a tough road, and I applaud the people who are willing to take that risk.
Absolutely. Same. Jim?
Well, I will say that since it's been 50 years, I don't think there's anyone that's withstood the amount of criticism that Travis had. Yeah. And since it's 50 years, I felt that it was important to recognize and honor Travis and the other members of the crew who want to come forward. So we're hosting a conference in Sedona in October to kind of celebrate this event. We're calling it the Skyfire Summit. And since I'm the Sedona MUFON State Section Director, it's under Sedona MUFON. So if anyone wants to look up this conference, it'll be 4 days. It'll start Friday night. It'll go Saturday, part of Sunday, and we'll conclude Monday morning. We're going to start out with Accidental Truth, which is one of the latest films I've been responsible to work with Ron James. It's a great film. So we'll start out, hard-hitting, giving people the information of what's happened. What is the process of, secrecy to transparency is the subtitle to the conference. And Travis will be there as well. We'll do a program there similar to what we have done here. And then on the actual day of November 5th, the actual anniversary at 50 years, the Sedona Film Festival is screening our film, Travis, The True Story of Travis Walton. And Travis will be there with me. We'll do questions, Q&A. We'll do a 3 o'clock and a 7 o'clock screening. And then a couple days later, down in Phoenix MUFON will be hosting us. And we'll do a lovely program there with a nice banquet dinner right at the Historical Museum in Phoenix. So there's lots of ways to show up, honor Travis, meet Travis, and get an education on the subject.
Absolutely. And just for those who want to get involved, who want to become an investigator, who want to even make their own report to MUFON, how do they go about doing that, Jen?
MUFON.com. You just go to MUFON.com, report a UFO. And it's Many people say it's not the best organization. No organization is.
That's right.
It's a group of volunteers,
Yeah.
and they're doing their best.
Thank you. I try to bring that up on the show all the time. There, like the webmaster gets paid a little bit. I think Mr. McDonald may make a little bit for being the CEO, but everybody else is a volunteer. It is even myself designing the logo for Project Aquarius. I did not get paid. I volunteered to do that.
Actually, the same is true with Dave McDonald.
Yeah.
He kind of rescued the organization, put it in his airport hangar, and said, "I'm not going to take a salary because this is important and it needs to."
And that's just it. That's just it. Any organization like that is out there, that is doing this, that is putting foot forward for good research, I am all about. Curious Research and Curious Realm are all about. So I want to thank both of you very much for your time today, for your very candid answers. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Christopher, for having us on.
I greatly appreciate it. Travis, thank you so much. While you were online, checking out everything from the Travis Walton documentary, as well as, what is the website for the festival again?
The festival is SedonaMUFON.org.
Okay, there you go, SedonaMUFON.org. Make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find the books, classes, and movies from our guests. That's also...
Well, speaking of books,
And
you can
also-
order mine at tcwalton75@gmail.
All right.
Or TravisWalton.com.
TravisWalton.com as well. So stay tuned, everybody. We will be right back with the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Roswell UFO Festival right here at the International UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. We'll be right back right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.